Okay, guys, sorry, this is going to be a little bit of a slow start. I'm using a different program this time, so I'm just making sure that I can still talk to you guys in the chat while I'm doing this. And I haven't even shared this URL yet, so just give me a few minutes here. If anybody's in the chat, say something right now. I just want to make sure that the chat's working. I'm using open broadcast software to do this time, so I can actually play some news clips for you and pull up some articles while I'm streaming. Yo. Okay, so there are two people in here. That's enough for me right now. So basically, um, I've been I've been wanting the opportunity to talk about Rudy Giuliani for a while. We were supposed to do it on the last Media Roots radio broadcast, and what happened is we ended up just going way too long, and we didn't really go into it. But what I wanted to do is go back to this article that I wrote in November of 2016. And I'll just pull it up really quick. So anybody who follows me on Twitter probably remembers this. But basically, the article was originally, inspired out of making a very heavy agenda, and I believe that I played a role in perpetuating what I believe to be a false paradigm about that, basically that the neocons only liked Hillary Clinton and that they were all against Trump. And I knew that wasn't necessarily the case while making a very heavy agenda, but what I noticed is as soon as I finished a very heavy agenda, that narrative, sort of watered down narrative of the neocons are for Hillary and they don't like Trump, started to spread online. It became sort of a talking point among libertarians and other people. And in part I can understand why. I mean, neocons were blatantly gravitating towards Hillary Clinton, and by neocons I mean like some of the more established neocons like Robert Kagan and Bill Kristol. So in this article, what I found was is that there were quite a few neocons who had loyalty to Donald Trump. And I'm just going to go through this a little bit quickly here. Basically, the title of the article, Trump promised to drain the swamp, but he's filling it with Bush-era crazies instead. The term crazies comes from former CIA analyst Ray McGovern. When he was working in the Reagan administration, he basically, the neocons during that time period were referred to as the crazies because they were the most insane war hawks, pathological liars, manipulators, and just bloodthirsty as hell. I mean, it doesn't need to really be explained why they were called the crazies back then. So in this article, I go through what I would describe as the craziers, people who were neocons, Project for the New American Century neocons, most of them, who were in some ways crazier or more crazy acting than neocons like Bill Kristol and Robert Kagan. And by more crazy, I just mean they would say more brazen things. And it's also worth mentioning that there was a split that occurred around the beginning of the Obama presidency. A lot of these more establishment neocons decided to gravitate towards the idea of trying to push Obama into doing their hawkish foreign policy things. Another camp of neocons sort of started to travel the Breitbart sort of right-wing media circuit, the Islamophobia circuit, some of them, like John Bolton and Frank Gaffney specifically, who are both big-time Trump supporters. And nobody watching this would probably find it a surprise that John Bolton is now in the White House every day talking to Trump personally as his national security advisor. And I hate to say that I predicted that this was going to happen, but I kind of did in this article, which is essentially showing all of the neocons who not only were a split from this pro-Hillary Clinton camp of neocons, but were also being courted by Donald Trump himself leading up to the election. Let me show you what I mean. So there's Michael Flynn, who is actually not in the Trump administration, although it was reported that he was advising the transition team. Michael Flynn co-wrote a book with Lieutenant Michael Flynn. The book was called The Field of Light: How We Can Win the Global War Against Radical Islam and Its Allies. Now, this is why I always took issue with the idea that Michael Flynn was somehow some kind of anti-deep state hero, simply for questioning the chemical weapons attack in Ghouta. When he was in the Obama administration, he questioned the chemical weapons attack's authenticity. A broken clock is right twice a day. So, I mean, if someone says that, that's good that they're questioning it, but that doesn't mean anything about their character, or that doesn't mean that they don't have an extremely disturbing Islamophobic neocon past. So this is what bothers me about what goes on here. Is a lot of people pull from these little kernels, and they're like, oh yeah, Michael Flynn, and he was the good guy that the establishment and the deep state wanted out because he was against this Russia hysteria and he didn't want to overthrow Assad. Okay, so those are maybe two things in a fucking vacuum that were good about Michael Flynn. Look at the rest of his record. Co-writing a book with Michael Flynn puts a black mark on his record it's like spilling an entire bottle of ink on a fucking piece of paper. The piece of paper was his record. It's toast at that point. So I really stress that stop paying attention to sort of these weird controlled opposition, lockstep, sort of right-wing alternative media narratives about Trump's people being anti-deep state heroes. It's obviously complete fucking bullshit. But I still see those narratives popping up all over the place, and it makes me really sad that people have been hoodwinked by these, what I would describe as a group of craziers who have split off from the normal camp of neoconservatives who want to bring us into war with North Korea and Iran. Michael Flynn is one of the biggest Iran war hawks, but like I was saying, he didn't make it in the administration. But let me go down to some of these other people. John Bolton, who I was writing about in November 2016 as being courted by Trump, is one of the biggest anti-Iran hawks there is in D.C. He formed a super PAC called the John Bolton PAC to destroy Rand Paul in ads about how he was against the that he was for the Iran deal. Now, this campaign was so vicious, apparently, against him that they got Rand Paul to flip. Just like they got Rand Paul to flip again recently about Mike Pompeo being a good guy. Extremely pathetic on Rand Paul's part for rolling over like that. But it's not a surprise. We've seen him roll over before, just like when he endorsed Mitt Romney for president in 2012. And in many other moments too. That wasn't Rand Paul's, weakest moment. He's had other many moments where he has rolled over. And also just trusted neocons when he's been talking about how dangerous neocons have been for the last, 8 years. But yet he just keeps trusting them, keeps rolling over to them. I mean, it's pick a side, Rand. During the primaries, the Republican primaries, when Trump was still running, Rand was previously talking about how Hillary Clinton was a neocon, talking about the neocons were trying to get us into war with Syria. And then all of a sudden he just decided to just be a little bitch about talking about neocons. And Megyn Kelly and Wolf Blitzer even had him on interviews, and they were like, "You've been talking an awful lot about neocons lately. Why don't you name names? Who are some of these neocons?" And he just sort of goes like, I'm not going to name names. It's like, why don't you name names? What are you afraid of, bro? Are you afraid you're not going to get asked back on Fox News? I don't understand why we wouldn't go after them after calling them by name. Neocons. Okay, let's name some of them. There really aren't that many specific neocons out there. And of course, James Woolsey, the source of the Saddam 9/11 Anthrax crisis nexus, is an extremely suspicious character. PNAC neocon, former CIA head under the Clinton, or under Bill Clinton. He was advising Donald Trump in the campaign as well. And one interesting pattern that I picked up from just doing this article and finding all these outlier neocons who are still pro-Trump was that almost all of them had strange and frankly very troubling connections to the 2001 anthrax attacks. And once I started finding this pattern, I got very, very concerned. And anybody who's been watching my stuff for long enough knows that I have come to the conclusion that the CIA itself, likely sent out the anthrax that murdered 5 American citizens in order to get us scared enough to want to go into Iraq and invade Iraq. So when people say Bush lied about WMDs, oh, they lied about WMDs, Saddam didn't have WMDs. I mean, to me, that's like a weird meta argument that's a framing trap, because it completely erases the fact that, like, yeah, the yellow cake uranium stuff, the nuke stuff, sure, they lied about that, obviously. But that was just like them throwing out smoke. They didn't have anything concrete there. What the Bush administration did have, however, is an ongoing terror attack, bioterror attack, that lasted for pretty much 3 months, that murdered 5 people in this country with a bioweapon that Saddam Hussein conveniently used to have stockpiles of. I mean, what are the chances of that? And of course, later, the Bush administration and the FBI tried to pin it on a lone scientist working for Fort Detrick, Maryland. But what whistleblower Matt DeHart has revealed is that it probably didn't come from Fort Detrick, Maryland. Even the National Academy of Sciences, the body that the FBI hired to verify their evidence, said that they can't verify that it came from there. So, to make a long story short, I have come to the conclusion that the U.S. government, or elements of it, were behind the 2001 anthrax attacks. And a lot of the Project for the New American Century neocons appeared to have a lot of hints that was coming. And you can call it prescience, you can call it whatever you want. I call it really fucking creepy. Really, really creepy. And I can't just write off coincidences like that and, so-called prescience like that as just, oh, these guys are just obsessed with, chaos and the sort of apocalyptic, mindset. No, it's too weird. And I'm going to go into some of those connections in a little bit more detail. But you can read this article on Mint Press News. The subtext behind the article is basically something I discovered while writing it, which is that all of these people have strange and troubling connections to the 2001 anthrax attacks. And these are all people, for some reason, that really glommed onto Donald Trump. And I'm not really going to speculate necessarily on why I think that's so scary. You could probably infer why that's scary. Trump was just talking about how we needed a major event to unify the country a few months ago. And I do find it very curious and confusing and also suspicious as to why people like Roger Stone and Alex Jones have been dog whistling the conspiracy movement into thinking Donald Trump is a secret truther, secret 9/11 truther. That is very fascinating to me. Combine that with the fact that Donald Trump just hired PNAC neocon John Bolton to be his national security advisor. How do you blend those two together? How do those fit together? Is this more of the QAnon, 4D chess, deep state conspiracy that Trump is planning on, taking out John Bolton eventually? Keep your enemies, to keep your friends close and your enemies closer kind of thing? I mean, what rationalization could you possibly come up with? Very, very, very bizarre that people can have both thoughts in their mind. And it wasn't just Alex Jones; it was several other truthers, frankly, who ran with this narrative, including Kevin Barrett of Truth Jihad, who I've felt was a charlatan pretty much since he appeared on the scene. Him and Jim Fetzer were largely responsible for spreading the space beams hologram plane theory, even though Kevin Barrett claims he wasn't responsible for that. I remember I was fucking there when it happened. So you can try to rewrite history, but a lot of people remember that era of when disinformation got heavily injected into the 9/11 truth movement, and it came mainly from two people. So Kevin Barrett wrote an article saying how when Trump gets in office, he's going to arrest Bill Kristol for 9/11. So there's a lot of this bullshit going around at the same time that the information was already out there that Trump was glomming onto PNAC neocons who had suspicious ties to the 2001 Anthrax attacks. Just let that sink in for a little bit. Why would someone who is a 9/11 truther be propping up Trump as a secret truther? Was it just because of that one video where he was questioning the way that the buildings or that the plane went into the buildings? I mean, that's not enough for me. And I haven't even mentioned Rudy Giuliani yet and Trump's relationship with him. So this is actually why I'm doing this podcast. And just a warning for anybody watching, this is going to get a little bit truthery. If you know my background, I have studied, 9/11 and the 2001 Anthrax attacks extensively. So just be warned, if that type of information is a little bit too far out for you, you might want to tune out of this podcast now. And what I ended up finding too, even Mike Pence. So, I mean, before I get to Giuliani, let me just really quickly go over a few things. James Woolsey was basically the person in charge of Operation Dark Winter, which is a very, very strange bioterror drill that occurred in June of 2001, starring Judith Miller, Jerome Hauer, who is in charge of WTC-7's command bunker, James Woolsey, several other national security officials, essentially doing a mock bioterror attack, a smallpox attack that crippled the entire country and infrastructure. And at the end of this mock bioterror attack, Operation Dark Winter, there's actually a fake terrorist threat letter that gets sent to the media network in this mock drill saying that we have anthrax. At the end of the drill, the next stage was going to be an anthrax attack. That's not the most bizarre part, actually, about the drill. One of the actual scripted lines in the drill, spoken by a fake TV reporter, they actually hired actors to do fake TV news broadcasts for this drill. They actually say, the news reporter says that whoever got this smallpox got it from, or it was a terrorist in Afghanistan who got it from someone in Iraq. And that's a very, very fascinating little bit of information that was in that drill, because that's essentially what the Bush administration and all the neocons tried to say as soon as the anthrax attack started hitting, was that, it must have come from Iraq, and maybe they even gave it to Al-Qaeda. That was kind of the theory they were laying out. Very, very strange. I mean, you could describe it as pre-programming. You could describe it as whatever you want. I mean, but I don't think you can look back at that and say, oh, that's just a bizarre coincidence. That's very, very strange. And we also have to remember that James Woolsey used to be the director of the CIA. Matt DeHart claims, and I strongly believe him, that the CIA was behind the 2001 anthrax attacks. Now, let's get to this recent appointment and this is also, these are also other people that don't get enough headlines. I mean, let's just, Newt Gingrich apparently co-wrote with McMaster, Trump's newest national security document that was released around December. This has not been reported anywhere, but the people who maintain the archives of the national security paperwork, people who maintain that website say that they know that it was Newt Gingrich. So I thought that was odd that just got zero reporting. And I also put Newt Gingrich in this article because he's essentially saying that it doesn't matter if it did the Anthrax attacks. It doesn't matter, who was really behind 9/11. We should go after Iraq anyways. And he was really hot on the Anthrax attacks at the time. I mean, if you watch his talk at the American Enterprise Institute, he's really, really excited about them. So we have some people in the chat now. Hello, everybody. Let me know if you have any, I guess, feedback about the way I'm doing this new stream with the sort of split graphics and split screen and stuff. So Rudy Giuliani. Trump just hired Rudy Giuliani to be part of his legal team. Apparently, it was announced originally that he was joining his legal team to help him end the Mueller investigation. So, John Gold says MEK. Be patient, John. I'm getting to that, and thank you for sending me all those notes. I will talk about MEK eventually. But first, I want to just talk about why Rudy entered the scene now. We remember, I mean, if you go back to around the time of the election and when his appointments were coming out, sorry, I just read something funny in the chat. Okay, anyways, so Giuliani was floated as being the potential attorney general pick before Jeff Sessions. I don't know if people remember that, but that was definitely a consideration. Trump was seriously considering it. Giuliani came on stage during the, what do you call it, the acceptance speech on the night of the election. He asked him to come on stage. It's been quite obvious that Rudy Giuliani has in some way or another been Trump's advisor this whole time. So whether it's been in an official capacity or not, it doesn't really matter to me because it's obvious that he's been involved. But what was bizarre is once I started to pick up this pattern of how Trump's neocons, let's call them, had each of their own suspicious connections to the 2001 Anthrax attacks, I started to get very concerned. I mean, you would think that people in the conspiracy movement who are now fucking obsessed with pedo rings everywhere would pick up on some of these details. That, hey, wait a second, why are all these people gravitating around Trump connected in some way or another with either spreading Bush-era propaganda about anthrax or having bizarre foreknowledge about the anthrax attacks? I'm literally the only person that I know of who has put together these dots, and that bothers me a lot. Why am I the only person who's done that? I mean, I'm not special. I mean, it worries me that more people aren't looking into this. And even if you're just a truther, man, I mean, let's just talk about his, I mean, Trump has said that Larry Silverstein is a good friend of his. So even just that alone, it's strange to me that anybody in the 9/11 truth movement would believe that somehow Trump is a secret one of them. It just doesn't make sense. But let's go to Giuliani for a second because there was a book that came out a few years ago called Another 19 by Kevin Ryan. It's a pretty dark book. It makes some leaps, some real leaps, but I think it's an interesting attempt at essentially finding what he describes as 19 people with the most suspicious connections to the 2001 anthrax attacks. None of them are Muslim, and all of them are American citizens. Most of them members of the elite. He suggests at the end of the book, or I'm sorry, he doesn't suggest this. Graham McQueen, in his book, The 2001 Anthrax Deception, makes a reference back to Kevin Ryan's book and says, maybe someone should try to find people with not just, suspicious connections to 9/11 foreknowledge or other things, but 9/11 and anthrax foreknowledge and other things. So combining suspicious connections to anthrax and the 9/11 attacks. When you combine those two worlds together, what you get is a very interesting, different picture of not just another 19 and the sort of the usual suspects people bring up in terms of 9/11, but Rudy Giuliani goes way to the top of this list. All the way to the top. I mean, that's not an exaggeration at all. The amount of connections Rudy Giuliani has to both 9/11 and the 2001 anthrax attacks is absolutely fucking insane. It's mind-blowing. And it almost seems ridiculous to suggest that the mayor of New York was somehow involved in the 9/11 attacks or the cover-up, and then also involved in the cover-up of the anthrax attacks. But when you begin to piece together all the evidence, it's very hard actually to look at it in any other way. And that's what I find so fascinating about this, is it doesn't even really fall into the realm to me at all of like kooky conspiracy speculation to just map all this stuff out. You pile up enough of these things that he was involved in, and anyone would be like, wow, that's really suspicious. What the hell's going on here? I mean, I would like to think so, unless someone is like some kind of Giuliani loyalist, which I don't even know if those people exist. But Giuliani is a weird motherfucker, and he is very brazen, very bizarre. And just the reason why I even decided to do this podcast is originally because Trump hired him to be on his legal team to help him get out of this Mueller mess. But what it looks like is that he might not get him out of this mess and might have actually made it worse for Trump, or it's some kind of bizarre strategy designed to admit that Trump paid off a porn star that he had an affair with, just to sort of clear the air. I honestly don't know. So I want your guys' opinion on this. I'm going to play this clip here of what he actually said on the Sean Hannity show. Give me a second. I'm new to this whole multitasking, multi-window thing, so just hold on, bear with me. Oh, good. Okay, that worked. So here, I'm going to play this very interesting clip, if anybody hasn't seen it so far. So this is a exclusive interview with Sean Hannity, with Rudy Giuliani.
Having something to do with paying some Stormy Daniels woman $130,000, I mean, which is going to turn out to be perfectly legal. That money was not campaign money. Sorry, I'm giving you a fact now that you don't know. It's not campaign money. No campaign finance violation. So
they funneled it through a law firm.
Funneled through a law firm, and the president repaid it.
Oh, I didn't know he did.
Yep.
When asked in
Oh, I don't know he did. I had to play that part again. That's too perfect. Here we go.
Oh, I didn't know he did.
Yep.
Okay. So either Rudy Giuliani slipped on live TV and it just blatantly admitted that Trump broke the campaign laws, or Trump, for some reason, has decided to come clean about this in the form of a Rudy Giuliani TV interview. Very, very bizarre. I mean, we're talking about the president who actually goes on Fox and Friends and says it's his favorite TV show. So apparently I'm on the fence about this a little bit, but I am leaning towards the idea that this was a deliberate strategy, that somehow this was Trump's version of, I'm going to come clean, let's come out with a statement, but he did it in the form of a fucking Rudy Giuliani going on the Sean Hannity show. Very, very funny. And it's just strange. It just goes along with Trump's bizarre behavior, bizarre strategic thinking that just doesn't make sense. I don't see how this is going to help him, but maybe it will. I'd like to see some other legal analysis of this that isn't like from MSNBC or people like Rachel Maddow. Maybe I want to see what people like Jonathan Turley have to say about this. And let me play you a longer clip here too. This one's a little bit more interesting. Someone in the chat says the porn star's story is zzz. I mean, sure, Vlad. If you thought the Monica Lewinsky story was, a boring and a distraction, that's your prerogative. But I would be surprised if you thought that. So I would like to just say for the record, people who are saying that the Stormy Daniels thing is just a distraction, it's who cares now, I think those people might be looked back on in the same way that Bill Clinton apologists were looked back on during the Monica Lewinsky affair. He fucked up on that. He lied under oath. He tried to cover it up, and it came back to bite him in the ass. So, I mean, if you believe Bill Clinton, shouldn't have gotten in trouble for that, and that was a distraction, that's fine. But I have a feeling a lot of people writing off the Stormy Daniels thing right now actually don't think that. They think Clinton deserved to go down over Monica Lewinsky. So I'm going to play this other Hannity clip. Thor Socks in the chat says, could Rudy just be losing it mentally? I mean, it's possible. It's possible. Trump appears to be losing it mentally to some degree. And if he does, let's hope he does it in a really extreme way, because this guy has a trail of dirt behind him like I have never seen in my life. I have never seen anyone. I mean, maybe someone like Oliver North, someone like that has a huge amount of dirt that you can go back. But Rudy Giuliani has so much; it's truly incredible. And I'm sorry I keep hyping it up, but I'm going to go into it in a little more detail in a second. Here's more from that Hannity interview. And this is Rudy after a commercial break going back to sort of reiterate and correct, maybe clarify some of the things he said after Sean Hannity was like, oh, this is after that.
All right, as we continue with President Trump's attorney, former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani, I want to clarify something, because I was asking you about Perkins Coie, and you said the money was not campaign money. I'm giving you a fact now that you don't know. It's not campaign money, no campaign violation.
Just look at him. He looks fucking
And I said because they funneled through a law firm. I think we were talking about two different things there.
What the fuck is he doing?
I was talking about the $130,000 payment,
right.
The settlement payment, which is a very regular thing for lawyers to do. The question there was, the only possible violation there would be, was it a campaign finance violation, which usually would result in a fine, by the way, not this big stormtroopers coming in and breaking down his apartment and breaking down his office.
Stormtroopers?
That
sounds like he's been listening to
money
InfoWars.
That was paid by his lawyer, the way I would do, out of his law firm funds or whatever funds.
Just by the way, InfoWars has been regularly promoting and running cover for Rudy Giuliani for the last year. I think that's very interesting as well. Let me continue this clip.
Doesn't matter. The president reimbursed that over a period of several months.
He had said, I distinctly remember, that he did it on his own.
He did?
Without asking.
Look, I don't know. I haven't investigated that. No reason to dispute that. No reason to dispute his recollection.
You can't even talk.
I like Michael a lot. You like Michael a lot.
A long time.
I feel very bad he's been victimized like this. The president feels even worse. The fact is, just trust me, they're going to come up with no violations there.
All right. You meaning the
yeah, payments are perfectly legal.
Let me go back to the main crux of it.
All documented.
Let me go back to the main crux. And the crux is that we have a two-tier justice system. The president's right when he says witch hunt?
Yeah, sure. You can't explain this any other way. First of all, there never should have been an investigation. There was no Russian collusion. We're now a year and a half.
I mean, he's probably right about that. I mean, that's the one thing that I'll agree with this on Trump, that it does seem like this is still some kind of witch hunt. In terms of if it was going after him for Russia collusion. Sure. But if Trump did pay off Stormy Daniels and lies under oath about her, does anything, I mean, you know, why? I guess I don't understand why anyone would be like angry about Trump going down for a huge fuck up that he did to himself. Like, just like I'll bring it back to Bill Clinton. Do you think Bill Clinton, Monica Lewinsky thing was someone just said it's TMZ gossip? I disagree. I mean, if there's a record of Trump paying her off and he did it and lied about it, it could take him down, and I think that's totally fair. So yeah, I don't share that point of view. And yeah, I agree with you, John. Stop this damn anti-Russia BS. I think it's a total fucking distraction, obviously. And I've been saying that this whole time. But let's go into Giuliani a little bit and why Trump is such good friends with someone like Giuliani. Why is that? Where did that come from? Well, let's go back to an SNL sketch that you've probably seen before.
There's lots of buzz. America! Dressed in drag in a there is just comedy years ago when Giuliani was married.
Oh, sorry, I'm trying to find this. It's God damn it! Sometimes YouTube is just a pain in the ass. Sorry about this. It's gonna take me a second. Okay, sorry. It was that was a really slow segue there. No, I didn't just accidentally load up a porn clip. You'll see what this is right now. This is when I first knew that Donald Trump and Rudy had a special relationship, and this is from the year 2000.
Oh, you dirty boy, you! Oh. Donald, I thought you were a gentleman.
Well, that was a bullshit clip. Sorry about that. If you haven't seen the clip, look up Rudy Giuliani in drag doing a sketch with Donald Trump, where Rudy Giuliani has giant fake breasts and Donald Trump rubs his face in them. Very, very interesting. And this was a year before 9/11. This is before Rudy was up to a lot of his craziest antics, which I'm about to go into. And Mick is right. The Russian stuff won't stop even if Trump's gone because it's not about him. Someone just said in the chat. That's absolutely correct. It's not about him. It never was. He was just the perfect excuse to use it. I mean, if you really want to make the argument, what was sort of the next 9/11 that they could use to exploit to push us into a new war footing, it was the election of Donald Trump. They used the emotional trauma and how upset people were at that election to push forward this anti-Russia hysteria. It was really a perfect membrane for them to do that on. And if Hillary won, I don't know if the whole establishment would have been able to push that as hard. I really don't know if it would have worked as well. So that's actually kind of an interesting dynamic. If Hillary won, would we be at this level of anti-Russia hysteria that we're at now? I don't know. because I honestly think if Hillary was in office, even her Democratic supporters might at this point start worrying that she's getting a little too hawkish on Russia. But now, because, she didn't win, they're all about Donald Trump being a Manchurian candidate. So I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm totally wrong about that, but that's my, I think that might have happened. Trisha says you should consider writing a very heavy agenda of the book. I wish I was a better writer, Trisha. I would consider doing that, but I have a long way to go before I can write a book, let alone being able to write one of my own articles without someone heavily looking it over and helping me edit it. So I'm going to just play you a clip really quick while I take a break here. Very short break. But this is to introduce this segment on Rudy that I'm going to go into detail on now. And I found this to be a pretty fascinating clip. Oh, man. Give me a second. Sorry. My keyboard got disconnected. Oh, my color got all fucked up on my webcam. Yeah, this happened earlier. It got all blown out. Now I'm not sure how to fix it. Oh, well. So
oil.
So just watch Rudy's facial expression here, and tell me what you think in the chat comments. We'll take a quick bathroom break.
There might be others that we just don't know about.
There was at least one terror attack on U.S. soil that happened after 9/11. I'm referring to the Anthrax attacks in New York and in elsewhere. Was that a terror attack, you believe?
Well, as far as I know, the FBI has never been able to figure out who did it and has never designated it as a terror attack. I mean, I lived through that.
But whoever was trying to do it was trying to terrorize a lot of people.
Yeah, but that was not done in the name, as far as we know, that was not done in the name of Islamic terrorism any more than, serial
right,
killers.
It could have been a domestic terror attack, too. We don't know, as you correctly point out, who was responsible for that Anthrax attack.
So you can't describe something as a terrorist attack if it hasn't been investigated and there's no proof. And the best thinking on the part of the FBI is that it wasn't involved with Islamic terrorism. But again, we're on pretty shaky grounds there because...
And you don't have any inside information on who was responsible? Who do you believe was... Because I know it happened in New York. We remember what happened...
Wolf, it not only happened, there was anthrax found in the office right next to mine. There was an attack on City Hall, as well as on the major networks and Governor Pataki's office. I mean, I was directly involved in that. At the time, I thought it was...
So the reason I wanted to play that clip is because he looks like he caught himself saying something that he didn't mean to say. He's going on and on about the anthrax attacks and how, as mayor of New York, he was directly sort of in the middle of that. And then he says, I was directly involved in that. And he does this like weird, like almost like his brain malfunctions, and he realizes that he said something, maybe like he let something slip. And yeah, I probably sound like a lunatic to people who don't know anything about Rudy Giuliani's connections to anthrax for thinking that was any kind of revelatory clip. But after learning what I learned about Rudy Giuliani and his connections to the 2001 anthrax attacks, I found that clip very interesting. So let me go into some of these now. Rudy Giuliani's connection to the 2001 Anthrax attacks and the subsequent cover-up. And just so you know, I mean, there are other connections to 9/11. And the most obvious one that 9/11 truthers pull out, and this has been documented, this is not a crazy claim, this is not a false claim, this has not been debunked in any way, shape, or form. Rudy Giuliani what said on live television while news reporters were following him that he knew, he got word that the tower was going to collapse before it did, and he was able to escape and save his life. He's the only person on record that I know of to actually say that about one of the two World Trade Center towers, that he was given information that it was going to collapse and was allowed to escape. That in and of itself is very interesting, and I don't think it's been examined closely enough. One of the more obvious things that Giuliani was involved in is the 9/11 rubble pile, the pile that the first responders were working on for so long, and that had dozens of human remains, or hundreds, if not thousands of human remains in them. We don't know, a lot of the human remains were never even found. That should have been seen as an active crime scene with forensic teams being sent to it. Rudy Giuliani is an attorney. He understands the law very well in criminal investigations. So it's very notable that Rudy Giuliani quickly destroyed all of the 9/11 crime scene evidence and had it shipped out of New York and recycled for steel in other countries like China, and sold off through multiple parties. Some of these parties even have connections to the mob. There's some strange lack of paper trail on the way that he removed a lot of the World Trade Center rubble. Other than that, John Gold says Judicial Watch Cipro. You're getting ahead of me, John. I'm gonna go into some of this stuff, but let me go into Rudy's connections to 9/11 and Anthrax first. And when I get to Jerome Hauer, I'll go into the Cipro thing a little bit. Rudy Giuliani profited immensely from the 9/11 attacks, from his various consulting and terror-related companies. It was actually during the Republican primary, I believe in 2012, where it really came out against him that he was using the 9/11 attacks to get votes and to get support. He even had a rally where he had people donate $9.11 each. He made his entire campaign about 9/11. Rudy Giuliani, if you're going to go to like one person who became a hero or a celebrity based on 9/11, it was Rudy Giuliani. He got the most for his career in terms of his presence, his fame, his credibility as a public figure out of 9/11. I don't think that can be disputed. Yeah, John, I hear what you're saying about the WTC-7 collapse. I'm talking about Towers 1 and 2. As far as I know, Rudy Giuliani was the only person to, at least on record, say that he had foreknowledge that one of those was going to collapse. Rudy Giuliani decided to move what is referred to as the OEM command bunker into World Trade Center Building 7. He made the decision with Jerome Hauer. And although Rudy Giuliani now later disputes that it was his decision with Hauer to move the OEM command bunker into WTC-7. And I think that it's pretty clear that if we're talking about the primary face hero of 9/11, I can't stress this enough. Rudy Giuliani appeared on more magazine covers and had photographs of himself appear in articles more than any other public figure in relation to 9/11. So he pretty much owes his, current career to it. John Gold actually mentions that Anthony Weiner, long before we knew of Anthony Weiner as the sex scandal shamed politician, he actually did a speech on the House floor where he talked about a lot of the issues I've just raised, specifically the destruction of the 9/11 crime scene evidence by the city of New York under control of Rudy Giuliani. And if you have that clip, John, of Anthony Weiner, as far as I know, the only person in the House to ever discuss the destruction of 9/11 crime scene evidence, please post it if you can. Post the link in the chat, John, if you can do that, because I'd like to play it for other people on the webcast. Rudy Giuliani was the co-organizer of a bioterror drill, not Operation Dark Winter, a different one called Tripod 2 that was scheduled to take place on the day of 9/11 but was canceled because of the attacks. When Rudy Giuliani announced the decision to move this OEM command bunker in Building 7, he said it was designed to prevent threats like, quote, anthrax attacks. It doesn't even make sense. It's so bizarre. Like, what was even the conceptualizing that went into that? Like an anthrax bomb being exploded over New York? It's odd. Anthrax is very easy to prevent, or even cure if you do it in time with Cipro treatments. So I don't see why a command bunker would be necessary for an anthrax attack. What that even means at all. And I haven't even gotten to the part that bothered me the most. That bothered me and made me believe that Rudy Giuliani had much darker connections to this stuff than I had previously believed. Rudy Giuliani conveniently had a company called Bio One that was assigned by someone in the U.S. government to, quote, fumigate the Florida Sun building after it had already been quarantined. If people have followed the anthrax attacks, basically the Florida Sun building is where Robert Stevens, photo editor, worked. He was infected with anthrax and died. The FBI never actually found a letter that was addressed to him or addressed to anyone at the Sun. So it's actually pure speculation and hearsay evidence that Robert Stevens got anthrax from a letter. We really have no idea how he got it. But Rudy Giuliani's company, Bio One, and this is kind of odd. Let's think about this for a second. He was in charge of destroying the evidence of the 9/11 crime scene. And again, another attack, the second attack, arguably, after 9/11, Rudy Giuliani's company was already specializing in fumigation of bioterrorist attacks and was given a contract to clean up the first anthrax crime scene. The location that the anthrax was sent to and someone was murdered. Apparently they got infected at that building. What are the chances of that? Just think about those two things together. What are the chances that the same man would be involved in destroying evidence and I'm saying destroying evidence. I don't know exactly what he did in his Bio One fumigation process. I can only go based on bits and pieces I've gotten from other articles, which I'll pull up a few of here. Sorry, I'm a little slow on this. I'm really still getting used to this whole format. I just want to prove to you I'm not making any of this up. This is all real shit. So, let me know if you can't read this for some reason. American Media Building in Boca Raton, Florida will be cleaned up by a group including former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani. Bio One will decontaminate the building from its anthrax infection and then occupy it itself, the Miami Herald reported Tuesday. Bio One is partnership of Rudy Giuliani's partners in Sabre Technical Services, which cleaned up the anthrax in congressional office buildings and post offices in Washington and New Jersey. The building was quarantined in 2001 after anthrax killed an editor of America Media Inc., which publishes the National Enquirer. So, in case this wasn't clear, in 2004, around 3 years, or maybe like two and a half years, I don't know this exact, I'd have to look at the dates exactly, was hired to fumigate the building of the Florida Sun where Robert Stevens died. But not just fumigate it. He was also hired to, well, not hired to, but he wanted to buy the building. Rudy Giuliani company didn't just fumigate this building. He wanted to buy it and move into it. He wanted his company to move into this building. That's very peculiar to me. Why? It really needs to be looked into. And this is something that I'm really seriously going to look into deeper in the future. It's going to require likely a trip out to Florida, getting in contact with a lot of the employees who used to work at the Florida Sun building during this time period, because there was another story that popped up. And this is what makes me believe that there was some destruction of evidence here. And that, I can assume maybe based on this that this was designed to be some kind of cover-up, but I'm not just pulling that out of my ass. I'll show you why. So this is an article from the New York Sun. Giuliani firm Anthrax work ends in a feud. An anthrax decontamination project in Florida that Mayor Giuliani showcased as one of his highest profile ventures after joining the private sector has fizzled out at a cost of millions of dollars to his firm. Now more than 16 months after Bio One declared that the offices were anthrax-free, there are no plans for the firm or Mr. Giuliani to return to the site. In fact, the building remains closed and under quarantine. So this is contradicting information here. I've read information before saying that Bio One had millions of dollars of contracts for this anthrax cleanup work, and that's interesting in of itself. That if Rudy Giuliani made profit off of the anthrax attacks and his cleanup efforts, that's noteworthy in and of itself. But this is almost more interesting, and this is something that I've gone back and forth on because I've found contradicting information. So this is what I mean by it needs to be looked much more deeply into. Bio One, it says on this article, Bio One has never been paid for its efforts. It could contribute to questions about Mr. Giuliani's management of his business endeavors since leaving office at the end of 2001. So this is interesting. This is why it ended in a feud. Photographers basically sued American Media Incorporated for like $2 million, and because they couldn't get their photographs back, all these archives, valuable original negatives and photographs they claimed were their own property. But Bio One's chief operating officer and general counsel, Karen Kavanagh, acknowledged that the photos and a lot of the materials left behind by Florida Sun employees in the Bio One building were doused in a chemical rinse. And that they were basically not fully decontaminated. So essentially they stole a lot of their property or just destroyed it. So it is interesting. Okay, so this is something else. So Bio One says was never paid for the anthrax killing project, which Mr. Giuliani told reporters would cost more than $5 million. It cost us quite a bit, she said. We were never compensated for the work we did there. That's very, very interesting. So why would the government give a contract to this company to clean up the post office in Brentwood, and then later they would take on this project of their own to go to Florida to clean up the Florida Sun building, but then not get paid for their work and just doing it pro bono? That's odd. What kind of motive would Giuliani's company have for wanting to do that? So let me pull up a couple more articles here. So this is another article about how Rudy Giuliani wanted to occupy the building after they were done cleaning it. And this is just some weird quotes that Giuliani said about it. He said, "This is a building that was incapacitated by a person or persons who sent anthrax here," Giuliani said. "It will now be a building that's going to be at the cutting edge of making us safer, healthier, and giving us a process to deal with possible further attacks by terrorist or perverse people." That's interesting because he just said James Comey was perverse on Sean Hannity. So yeah, just look into this Bio One Giuliani anthrax connection. It's very fascinating how a man would have connections to essentially potential cover-ups in both major attacks that happened back to back. Hey John, can you just post a link in the chat instead of sending me an email? That would be very helpful. Thank you. Here's more information about the anthrax work ending in a feud. It's very, very strange. I mean, basically, they decided not to buy the building because they refused to give up their property back to all the employees and the reporters who worked there because they said weren't able to decontaminate them. I don't actually know how this lawsuit ended, and I would like to find out more detail about it. So, as you can see, I have more research to do in this area, but I think it's a very important lead to follow. And, after knowing what I've learned about Rudy Giuliani from sort of the truth movement and then also learning this, it's quite bizarre. Here's also something else. So the FBI was going back to the Florida Sun building up to a year after the attacks, searching for new evidence. That's pretty interesting as well, because what new evidence would they have been looking for that long after? I mean, And it mentions again in this article that they actually didn't find a letter. So I guess all in all, I just find it very strange how Rudy Giuliani is not just in the shadows and hiding, just trying to retire in peace and quiet. Because clearly he's sitting on a mountain of skeletons in his closet. I mean, I've just never seen anything like this. And I'm not sure how you could explain away some of these coincidences. I mean, I would like to see someone try. Maybe Rudy Giuliani was just in the wrong place at the wrong time, and happened to have an anthrax cleanup company, already ready to go right after he destroyed the 9/11 crime scene evidence. I would love to see someone explain away those coincidences. Okay, John says that it doesn't let him post a URL inside the chat, so he said he emailed it to me. So I'm going to play you a clip in a second here of our good friend Anthony Weiner. Oh, it's a C-SPAN clip. I can't play this. How long is this clip? That's not too long. Okay, let me see if I can actually... Give me a second here. I know this is a very sloppy live stream. I apologize for the unprofessionality of it. Okay. I have to fuck with this a little bit. Give me a second. Gotta fuck with the dimensions. Ah, shit. Give me a sec, sorry. Okay, I think I got most of the whole window there. So I'm going to play you this clip where, as far as I know, this is the only politician to ever bring up any of the things I just mentioned. And I don't remember if he actually brings up Giuliani by name. But let's listen to it and find out.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And first, let me begin by expressing my thanks to you. While some of our committees have been slow to take up the challenge of the post-September 11th analysis and legislative action, you have been a true leader in getting the Science Committee involved. On November 12th, I and my constituents had the misfortune, and hundreds of families were ravaged by the crash of Flight 586. Within literally moments of that plane crash, the National Transportation Safety Board was on the ground, sequestering evidence, interviewing witnesses, subpoenaing information if necessary, and since then they have offered periodic reports. 1 month and a day earlier, when the World Trade Center collapsed, nothing could have been further from the truth. According to reports that we've heard since, there has been no comprehensive investigation. One expert in fire engineering concluded that there was virtually a non-existent investigation. We haven't examined any aspects of the collapse that might have impacted rescue worker procedures, even in this last month. Second, reports have emerged that crucial evidence has been mishandled. Over 80% of the steel from the World Trade Center site has already been sold for recycling. Much of it, if not all of it, before investigators and scientists can analyze the information. Third, we've allowed this investigation to become woefully bogged down in infighting and lack of cooperation among agencies. Researchers from FEMA did not get timely access to the designs of the building. News accounts have said there has been friction between engineers and FEMA because of concerns about where the information would wind up. Even the National Science Foundation, which was awarded grants to several scientists to study the collapse, but didn't coordinate these efforts with FEMA or the American Society of Civil Engineers. And finally, we have seen painfully that the financial commitment to this investigation simply is not there. It is not uncommon to spend tens of millions of dollars investigating why a plane crashed, but we've yet to spend even $1 million on this investigation, and the Bush administration has refused to commit to release the full funding necessary. But what difference does it make? Some might ask. Who could have foreseen such a catastrophic event? Well, the same could be said, frankly, any time a plane crashes. Yet every time we learn about why one plane crashed, we save future people from being victims as well. We could learn what firefighters should know before they go into buildings. We should learn what families like Vincent and Demencia Ragusa, who are from my district, who lost their son, a firefighter who went into that building, unaware, as I'm sure many of us, as we were, that those buildings were about to go down. We can learn about future design of buildings, and perhaps as importantly, we might be able to revisit buildings that are currently standing and learn ways to make their occupants and firefighters safer. That is why I'm going to be introducing legislation to give the National Institutes of Standards and Technology similar line authorities that the National Transportation Safety Board has. Whether it's a plane crash or a building collapse, we must get to the truth. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much.
Oh, geez. How long was my mic mute? Oh, man. Sorry about that. Basically, what I was saying was, after I played that Anthony Weiner clip, I hope you were paying attention to some of the tidbits that he was saying about the destruction of the 9/11 crime scene evidence. Because as far as a mainstream politician, he's the only one to bring that up that I know of. And he brings up a very good point. He says, why are we not spending, the top amount of resources on investigating why these buildings collapse so that we can prevent future building collapses, so that when firefighters go into buildings, they can know, oh man, this building might collapse. It's this type of building, or it was constructed this way, whatever. I mean, even the NIST report doesn't really go into anything about like, here's why you shouldn't design buildings this way in the future. As far as I know, there really is sort of no like architectural study or assessment or widespread belief that fundamentally changed after 9/11 about the type of buildings that are constructed and why you shouldn't construct certain kinds because they're more likely to fall from fire. That alone should make people curious. Why haven't architectural firms all over the world fundamentally changed their entire practice? Why haven't structural engineers fundamentally flipped a bunch of their conventional wisdom inside their industry about why you can build tube construction buildings or whatever? So Anthony Weiner does raise a very interesting point that largely got lost later on and basically became something that people say, oh, you must be a 9/11 truther if you bring that up. That's something a truther would say. That's conspiracy theory. It actually wasn't at all. There were a lot of regular people who just, their gut reaction is, wow, how did these buildings just collapse from, two planes hitting them? That doesn't make sense. We really need to find out what happened. And we're sort of looking at it that way instead of saying, there were bombs planted in the buildings and they blew up. There were just regular, like Anthony Weiner. He was like, why, what happened here? Like, we need to know immediately what happened. And without that evidence, and he brings up the fact that the evidence was destroyed by Rudy Giuliani. Why was that evidence destroyed? And while I do really strongly appreciate the efforts of 9/11 truthers and other people who want to open up the 9/11 investigation again, or even open up an investigation into why the buildings collapsed again, I so appreciate that passion and that energy and that dedication. But I think that we need to remember that Rudy Giuliani, as the mayor of New York, made sure to destroy all of that 9/11 crime scene evidence. I mean, the entire crime scene was essentially destroyed and turned into scrap. It was not forensically investigated on the pile like it remained right after the attacks. It was only investigated later by groups like NIST and FEMA who used pieces. And we don't so no one has really actually investigated the crime scene, and no one ever will be able to. So that's, I think, the problem that we're facing is, as much as we would like to do a thorough investigation, without sort of the cover up, sort of actively in play, we still need access to that crime scene, and more than just dust and little bits and pieces that were saved away in different places. I think. I mean, maybe some, someone would disagree with me on that, but I think that it's really unfortunate. And why did Rudy Giuliani do that? Who is he really doing these things for? Was he a tool being used by other people to destroy evidence, to do these cover-ups? It's hard to say. I mean, Rudy Giuliani's past and involvement with sort of like shady neocon and deep state operators goes back to the 1980s as well. This is not new for him. Rudy Giuliani is heavily involved with the group MEK in Iran. He not only took money from them, as John Gold pointed out, he was also instrumental in getting this group off of the designation of the terror list in the United States. So I'm just going to read the chat really quick. I'm kind of running out of steam here, to be honest, guys. I feel like I kind of flubbed this attempt at doing what I originally planned to do for this podcast. But I learned a lot from trying this new piece of software and maybe how to better utilize it in the future. But I just think we really need to look more closely at Rudy Giuliani as being a potential 9/11 suspect and also Anthrax suspect. And I guess that's just my final word on it. And I don't care if you think that sounds loony or truthery or whatever the fuck. I mean, it's, after looking at all the evidence, I really don't, I think you would have to be dense or just, I don't know, to not think that these things are strange about Rudy Giuliani once you really pile them all up. And to say that Trump is fighting the deep state, or the deep state's, gunning for Trump, or it's Trump, you have the deep state on one side and Trump on the other. I mean, look at someone like Rudy Giuliani and tell me that he's not connected to the deep state. Can you really tell me that honestly, that Rudy Giuliani isn't deeply connected to some kind of deep state apparatus? His law firm also defended General Noriega. So just look into his history. Look into his associations with 9/11. Look into his associations with Anthrax. And then question why this supposed secret, anti-establishment truther, anti-deep state President Donald Trump is hiring people like Giuliani and PNAC neocon John Bolton and these other people to be so close to him. What is that? What's going on there? What does that mean? Well, at the same time, we're getting conspiracy dog whistled into thinking Trump is a hero, fighting these people. It's very, very strange to me. And I just think it cannot be overlooked. So if anybody wants to look deeper into those Giuliani Anthrax connections, be my guest. Feel free to take it and run with it. There is a lot of stuff out there that needs to be sort of put into a chronological timeline and given more detail, because from what I've read between these various media stories about it, there's not enough detail to really paint a full picture of what happened, and even how, what is the history of even that company Bio One? Why was Rudy Giuliani on this Anthrax tip before 9/11, other than his Jerome Hauer connections? And Jerome Hauer, by the way, is someone with also very bizarre connections to both events. He was the first person to go on television to explain why the buildings collapsed on the day of 9/11, along with Rudy Giuliani's fire chief. So that's also very interesting. But Jerome Hauer was allegedly the person who told the Bush administration to take Cipro on the evening of 9/11 as well. And since 9/11, Jerome Hauer and Rudy Giuliani have had a falling out, and they apparently don't like each other anymore. So, and Jerome Hauer sits on the Chertoff Group's board now. He was also a managing director of Kroll Associates around the time of 9/11. So thanks for listening, guys. Really appreciate you tuning in, and thanks for bearing with me with these technical difficulties and just me kind of amateurishly trying to use open broadcast software. And just a note to anybody who wants to use open broadcast software, it's freeware, so it's tempting, but apparently it doesn't work with any Motu sound card. And I spent about an hour trying to figure that out earlier. And yeah, I eventually got it to work, but I had to buy another piece of software called Loopback to do an audio routing back into the program. So just keep that in mind. My audio works on Skype, didn't work on here until I fiddled with it for about an hour. But it's a cool program. You can layer different windows, different video clips, a bunch of different stuff. So once I can figure out how to use this in real time without looking like a total amateur, I'll do another stream. Thanks. Take care, guys.